A pretty typical experience of many parents is that the child stops speaking one language. That can be a very young child, and it can be a teenager as well. If it's a very young child, then look at the child in terms of what it's trying to do. She or he may be just wanting to communicate in the most effective and efficient manner possible. That is, they're not worried about what language they're using. That's not an issue for them. What they want to do is get their message across in the easiest way possible for them. So the fact that they're not using one language may simply be pragmatic. In that kind of case, then don't stop using the weak language with the child. You can still respond to the child in the other language. Keep giving the child language practice and what seems like passive bilingualism, where they speak one language but only tend to understand and listen in the other language, will change over time. With plenty of practice, with changes of circumstances and schooling, for example, then a child may grow in that language. With teenagers, of course, it's a different scenario. During the teenage years, there's the desire to have a different status, to have some degree of independence perhaps, and therefore teenagers can quite quickly decide they don't want to speak a language, particularly if they think it's a low status language. And that happens in many situations, not just immigrant situations, but sometimes minority language situations where teenagers rebel, yes, and start speaking the majority language only. Respond with patience to that. With a language, there has to be conviction, not conformity. Telling the teenager they have to speak one language is going to work in the opposite direction. It's better to still keep talking to the child in the language they do not prefer to use, so they get plenty of experience. But let time take its own course. And very often teenagers turn into 20-year-olds who want to use both languages, and so very often what seems to be a monolingual teenager blossoms later on into becoming a very fluent bilingual. In the end, what parents have to do is to sow the seed. They have to try to tend the garden and make sure that the context, the environment of the garden is as good as they can make it for bilingualism to grow. But in the end, the parent can't force the growth of the tender young language plant. They can provide the conditions, but they can't force the colour and the blossoming of that young plant. That is within the child, the teenager, the 20-year-old themselves. And very often, a passive bilingual becomes an active bilingual later in life. So don't despair.